Here we go. Corner. 5, 6, ready, and 1, 2. Front, 2, 1, 2. Here we go. Double right, double left. 4 more. 7, 8. Great, ladies. So, very good job. Make sure that when we go into the double kick, it's very easy to just, because it is a double kick and it's a little bit harder, that we try to go a little bit higher than eye high.
When I walked up, Kathy, my notebook fell.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our March 2nd meeting. We're glad to see you. The board did take some action in closed session. I'd like to report that out at this time. The board accepts the resignation of employee 130711 and released them from their contract. Also, Paul Defoe and Lana Goffman were voted in closed session to be promoted to child welfare and attendance managers. And Dr. Hanson, you have some information to read?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And as I call your name, if you'd please stand, I'd like to first introduce Paul Defoe. Paul, if you'd stand. Mr. Defoe has a teaching administrative credential as well as a Master's of Arts in Education from the University of Redlands. He started his career in the Harupa Unified School District as a substitute teacher in 1998, and from 1998 to 2001, he taught special education, students in grades K through 3, and in 2001 through 5, he taught regular education K through 6. He was promoted to assistant principal at Mission Middle School in November 2005, and promoted to principal at Van Buren Elementary School in 2007. In 2007, he joined Riverside Unified School District as a principal at John Adams, where he's been the last 8 years. And we congratulate Paul and welcome him to the Child Welfare and Attendance position. Lana Goffman, Lana Miss Goffman received her Bachelor's degree of Science in Organization Management from the University of La Verne. She also received her Master's of Science in Special Education at California Baptist University and her administrative credential from Chapman University. She was a special education teacher in Riverside Unified from 2000-2005, a categorical program specialist teacher, and from 2006 to current, she has been in a variety of administrative positions, most recently assistant principal at King High School, and most recently the assistant principal at the Educational Options Center at Summit View, overseeing Summit View and Riverside Virtual School. And again, we welcome you, Lana, and congratulate you on your promotion to the Child Welfare and Attendance.
And we're very glad to see you in your new jobs, and we look forward to it. We now have the Ramona High School Marine JROTC Color Guard presentation and the Pledge of Allegiance by Matthew Nakafuji from Thomas Rivera. Go ahead, Matthew.
May the audience please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Order. Forward. March.
Good job by Ramona. Thank you very much. And I would now like to read a little bit about Matthew Nakafuji. Rivera Elementary School is proud to have Matthew Nakafuji representing Rivera and leading the Pledge of Allegiance tonight. Matthew, a sixth grader, is described as a diligent, kind, and high-achieving scholar. He is a Boy Scout with the rank of second class, and he aspires to achieve Eagle Scout. Matthew, along with his troop, participated in the flag-raising ceremony during the school's Patriot Day celebration on September 11th, 2014. Matthew also has been a finalist in the District Science Fair. His favorite subject is science, and his goal is to pursue higher education at Purdue University with an emphasis in chemistry. Matthew enjoys reading and spending quality time with friends and family. He also enjoys visiting his grandfather and many family members in Oahu, Hawaii. And I would now like to give Matthew this certificate.
Want to introduce your family? Your mom? No? No, I'm fine.
Hello, family. Principal, family. Okay, turn around. Thank you for your help. Good job. Okay, and now we are glad to have a group performance by the Southern California School Band and Orchestra Association Elementary Honor Band. They're going to be performing. So, who is in charge of that? Who's? Oh, there you are. Hello. Go ahead and introduce it as you will.
Ladies and gentlemen, the group in front of you here is mostly made up of the inaugural year of Riverside representatives for the Southern California School Band Orchestra Association Elementary Honor Band. The SCSBOA has many honor groups that perform every year, but this was the first year they elected to have an honor band for elementary-aged kids and an honor orchestra. Riverside sent 13 members to be a part of that performance, which took place in front of the Anaheim Convention Center for the 2015 NAMM show. That's the National Association of Music Merchants. So in front of an auditorium of thousands of musicians and music merchants and vendors, our students got to perform a couple of various tunes under the direction of Gary Yerrick, a retired band director from Orange County. So we have 11 students tonight from that group and 3 students from our own Central Cluster Elementary Honor Band. And we're going to perform for you the Union March and parts of Northridge Overture. Hope you enjoy. Thank you. So this being the inaugural year for the Honor Band for SCSBOA, we're hoping that it'll continue. We represented, Riverside students represent about 1/3 of the group's performers at the event. So we're hoping to keep pushing and keep that going because we had a great reputation. Next event for Riverside students, most of these guys up here will be going to our festival at Ramona High School coming up on March 12th and 13th with the Central Cluster Elementary Honor Band. This next tune, Northridge Overture, is for that performance. Here we go. Drummer steps forward.
you very much. Excellent. You can sure hear the seeds of a future high school concert greatness in them. So thank you very much. You guys did a great job. Thank you. Great. Now we're going to hear from our high school representatives. We're going to start with Ramona High School, Tracy Doan.
Good evening, Madam President Alavi, Dr. Hanson, members of the board. My name is Tracy Down. I'm here to represent Ramona High School. So on February 5th, we had a perfect attendance luncheon where we served barbecue to over 500 of our students. And then on February 12th, we had an ice cream social serving 524 students who received honor roll. And we also gave each of them a shirt that says honor roll on it. And then on February 25th, we had an 8th grade day where we invited over 600 students from Sierra and Shamawa Middle School who will be attending Ramona next year. We had theater performances, band performances, color guard, and cheer performances in our gym. And over 60 of the clubs on our campus were there so the 8th graders can walk around and see which club they want to join next year. On January 30th, we had our winter pep rally. Our theme was Grease, and we had our teachers dressed up as pink ladies and greasers, and they had a dance battle. And then February was our month of kindness. So the first week was the week of respect. We gave each and every single student and teacher a button with their name on it. And then the second week was the week of love. We sold rose grams and also we give out free candy grams for Valentine's Day. And then the third week was the week of peace. We had a wish tree where everyone can write their wish on a tag, and we attach it to a tree in the middle of our school. And then the last week was the week of kindness, and we had a compliment day where everyone go around and give every person a ribbon, and we tie it on another person, and we compliment them, and that spreads around the school. For our Linker program, in honoring Kindness Week, they gave out free compliment grams, deliver them the same way as we deliver our Valentine's Day gram. And they also gave the tours to 8th grader during our 8th grade day around the campus. And then for our performing art, on January 23rd, we had a senior recital and then a piano and gold recital on February 18th. And then the 26th and 27th February, we had a theater performance called The Night of One Act. And then for our band, on February 7th, we had our district honor band performance. And then the 13th, we had our dynasty band perform at Disneyland. And then on the 21st, we had the ADLA show where our concert percussion won first place and our marching band won third place. And then for our color guard, on February 10th, the boys and girls color guard received a 4th place on pad A and B at the color guard meet. For athletic or girls water polo, boys basketball, and girls basketball all made CIF playoff. And then on February 4th, we hosted a tailgate where we served free food for people who dressed up in all blue to show our brand pride for our boys basketball games against Hillcrest. And then on February 7th, we held our 3rd annual alumni softball game on the Ramona varsity softball field. And then for our AVID program, on February 13th and 14th, our AVID juniors and sophomore went on a 2-day college tour to San Diego where they visit several college campus. And that's it for my speech. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I love that compliment day. That was a great idea. I love a compliment day. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much, Tracy. And now for Educational Options Center, Paige Van.
Hello, Mrs. Alavi and Dr. David Hanson and the other board members. My name is Paige Van and I'm representing the Educational Options Center. One thing's for sure, football has remained undefeated. Sports aside, we have selected a chemistry teacher, Mr. Larson, as the Teacher of the Year. And so far we've had 58 graduates this year. A large number of them were fifth-year seniors, so it's nice to see them finally finish. And as for the college-bound students, a good number showed up for the Cash for College and filled out their FAFSA applications. And an RCC ambassador will be on campus every week in order to help students make the transition to RCC. And then next we have the AVID students who participated in a write-off, which was themed Failure and Success in School. And tomorrow they will be going to UCR for an off-campus escapade. And last but not least, full-time RVS student Kiram Trisick won the Senior Individual Documentary Award for History Day on his project about the Harada House. And it will become part of the Riverside Metropolitan Museum's exhibit titled I Want the Wide American Earth. And for those of you who are interested in seeing the house, it's on Lemon Street.
Very good, very good. Have you been to the Harada House?
I have not.
Oh, so you're going to go, right? Because you're going to
Yes.
like it. Okay, that sounds great. Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah, one is-
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Hunt.
Hi, Paige. I just wanted to ask you about your experiences. How long have you been at EOC?
I've been there since the second semester of last year.
And you find it fulfills your
Yes.
educational needs and the way you want to study and
Yes,
et cetera?
because I kind of have to teach myself everything in a way because I do the virtual school. I feel like I'm learning almost more than I would in just regular school.
Well, thank you for being part of this. We look forward to hearing more from you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, from John W. North High School, Allison Baird.
Hello, President Alavi, Dr. Hanson, and members of the school board. My name is Allison, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about all of the awesome things that have been going on at North the past few months. So last Thursday, February 26th, we held our very first Freshman Summit, in which members from our USL, Renaissance, and Multicultural Council each spoke to every single one of the 600 freshmen, and we talked to them about their extracurricular involvement and their grades. So it was a really awesome opportunity for us to connect with them on a more personal level, and also just to encourage them to do their best in school. Tomorrow, we're super excited to host our Husky Pride Day for incoming 9th graders. So middle schoolers from all over the district will come to North High School tomorrow and get their first glimpse into high school. What's going to happen is they're going to be greeted by USL members, and then they'll be shown to the theater where they'll see performances by our Harlequins, our BSR, and our Pep Squad. And then after that, they'll get the unique opportunity to go to the gym where over 70 club booths will be set up. And they'll get to walk around and see what kinds of clubs and activities and sports teams are going to join next year. This year is really special because for every freshman who commits to join at least 2 clubs, they will receive a fruit roll-up, which is also in front of you for fun. Yeah. Okay. Also tomorrow in the afternoon, we're going to have a second Club Rush Day, so our Spring Club Rush Day, which will give the freshmen we talked to at the summit an opportunity to sign up for at least 2 clubs or activities, as well as our sophomores and juniors to get more involved. So this initiative will align with the School Plus 2 initiative as well. As far as student recognition, Renaissance held our first semester Husky Recognition Luncheon, in which every teacher was asked to nominate one special student for their character or their helpfulness or just their wonderfulness. And they were given a free lunch of pizza and cookies and also a certificate. Our sports teams have also been doing really well. Our boys and girls basketball teams, as well as our boys soccer team, were Inland Valley League champions and advanced to CIF. The boys and girls basketball teams even competed in the Elite CIF Open Division with the top 16 teams in California. As far as community involvement goes, our Law and Protective Services Academy actually had the opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C., where they met with Congressman Takano, they toured the White House, and they even got to experience snow for the first time, which was really cool. I just wanted to say that our students and teachers who are traveling to China this month are extremely excited. We've even been attending special seminars led by Mr. Kinnear to learn common Chinese expressions as well as things about culture. And our China trip is also on this evening's agenda for board approval. And also, I just have one more announcement. I have just been informed of some wonderful news. Mr. Davis, our assistant principal, has been named the Riverside County Certificated Manager of the Year. And so I'd like to present Mr. Davis with a bag of special M&Ms because he loves chocolate.
You better come forward, Mr. Davis. We need to congratulate you. That's a pretty big special award. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Any comments, any questions?
I wondered if it would be all right to pull item, well, she's still here, item E9, and move it forward so we could vote on it, and she can go back and tell her peers in the morning, because I know you got homework to get home to.
Yeah.
I think that would be possible.
Thank you, Mrs. Alavi.
Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Very good. And do I hear a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded that we approve item E9, which are out-of-country field trips for John W. North High School. All those in favor, go ahead and vote.
I got to say, Allison, that was pretty pro, the way you slipped that in there. That was good.
Oh,
see what you got here now? That's good.
You can go back and say it has been approved.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Alavi.
All right, and now from Riverside Poly High School, Mae Johnson.
Good evening, Madam President Alavi, Dr. Hanson, and members of the board. My name is Mae Johnson, and I will be reporting on behalf of Poly High School. I do not have too much to report today, but I'll get started by talking about our sports. Our winter sports teams did exceptionally well this year, with soccer competing in the semifinals of CIF tomorrow at 5 at Poly High School, if you guys want to stop by. And our wrestling team also sent 3 wrestlers to what's called the Masters, which is like their equivalent of a CIF. And girls water polo made it to CIF finals last Saturday, but unfortunately they lost. But second place isn't too bad either. And now that our winter sports have wrapped up, our spring sports have began to practice and Track's Case compete, where they had their first competition last Saturday. Once again, our mock trial team is doing exceptionally well this year. They've progressed to what's called the Elite 8, and this weekend they will be performing in the semifinals. And 6 students of the team have been individually recognized for their contributions, and those students are Kendall Foray for Best Defense Attorney, Jared Knaus for Best Prosecution Attorney, Brendan Brown for Best Defense Pretrial Attorney, and he's also been offered a paid summer internship for his performance. Antonio Saros for Best Witness, Yadira Schroem for Best Witness, and Kaylin Wilson for Best Witness. And Poly High School recently has been doing a lot more to support the mock trial team in a way that you would support a sports team by acknowledging them on the announcements, and now they're able to letter and get a letterman's jacket for all their hard work that they do on the mock trial team. Our JROTC recently hosted their 99th JROTC military ball this last Friday, and ASB is still going on and planning our prom, which will be held April 11th with the Under the Sea theme. And finally, I would like to report that our credit recovery program is on track, and we have so far recovered 89 courses for the first semester, and that's 445 credits for those seniors. That concludes my report. Is there any questions?
That's great. Mrs. Cloud, did you want to make a comment? Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I have just one.
Go ahead.
Being the ex-water polo dad, I do want to point out that Poly was moved up a division and still made it to the finals against a team that had moved down a division. So we could be very proud of what Mike Carty did and what our coach up at King did. Really a good day for Riverside.
Absolutely. Congratulations to everybody at Poly.
Thank you.
Good work. Thank you. Thank you to all of our high school representatives. Really appreciate it. All right, now if you want to, you can go home and do your homework. Thank you very much. And now we will hear from the district superintendent.
Thank you, Madam President. As Allison said, I'll talk about that first, but today Riverside County Superintendent of Schools Ken Young, Board President Kathy Alavi, our Chief Academic Officer Lynn Carmaday, and Assistant Superintendent Antonio Garcia and I made a visit to North High School to visit Rich Davis, longtime a teacher and administrator there. And Rich has been chosen as the 2014-15 Riverside County Certificated Administrator of the Year for the whole entire county. And Rich will be recognized with other employees this year in celebrating Educators Luncheon that will be held in May. And Rich, we just couldn't be more happy for you and grateful that you're representing Riverside Unified. So again, we applaud you. Also recognition, Assemblyman Jose Medina has selected 21 women of distinction for 2015 to be recipients of the 61st Assembly District Woman of Distinction Award. And our very own Board President, Kathy Alavey, was chosen as one of those women of distinction who has made a significant contribution to the community and has served as a role model and mentor for many, many young women. And she'll be honored on March 23rd at a luncheon that Assemblyman Medina will be hosting. Kathy, again, we're so happy for you that you're selected, and applaud you for all your many years of service to the entire community as well as the school district.
That's very nice.
This past Saturday, I had the opportunity to serve as a panelist for the Inlandia on the No Easy Way Casablanca panel. And the topic covered was Riverside School Desegregation as a forerunner to multicultural education. It was a good experience. I learned a lot about the history of Riverside, and this was the second of 5 different panels in this series, and we look forward to having Riverside represented in the future on these panels. And I believe that Mrs. Alavey is also sitting on the panel in the near future. And last, but certainly not... first off, I want to remind the board that on March the 12th, that's a week from Thursday, we'll continue our series of board workshops with shared governance, and I believe that's going to be hosted at Central Middle School starting at 5:30 p.m. Again, that's a week from Thursday on March the 12th. And last but certainly not least, although I know that we're going to close later this meeting in adjournment, I want to note the recent passing of Artie Baylor, and how we are all saddened by her loss, and especially the loss of this pillar in our community and our school district who she had served so well for so many years. She's left behind a strong legacy and one that will be felt and remembered for many, many years to come. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. We've now arrived at the section of public input, and this is an opportunity for people to speak on items that are not on our agenda. And because they're not agendized, we can't really engage in conversation, but we're happy to ask questions and hear from our public. So tonight we have Nathan Miller who would like to speak. Nathan? Oh, I'm sorry. You are speaking to an agenda item, aren't you? Okay, we'll just hold that off for item G1. All right, now we will have RCTA presentation by Mr. Tim Martin, President of the Teachers Association.
We have no shame. And I'm trying to be serious here, Mr. Hunt. Could you stop? All right. Good evening, President Alavey, Mr. Hunt, Dr. Hanson, and members of the board. Recently, The Economist printed an article entitled Teachers with Class. In it, there were a number of points made about supporting excellent teachers. One recommendation made by the author is that the best teachers are supported best when surrounded by excellent teachers. Imagine. Throughout this year, in my comments to you, I have focused on conditions of teaching and learning and about the efforts of RCTA to center on doing the best for our students. Or in other words, how to provide support for excellent teachers and teaching, and how to best care for our students. What has RCTA done this year, and what will we do in the days ahead? To support excellent teachers and excellent teaching, we sent 25 teachers to a fall conference that provided workshops on Common Core, teacher and student technology, the SBAC, transitional kindergarten, and other issues teachers address in the classroom. During the first semester, we provided 20 grants to teachers in the amount of roughly $10,000 for the arts or community service projects. We will do that again in the spring. In January, over 50 teachers spent their Saturday morning attending an RCTA training on classroom management. Other trainings on teacher technology are being planned for April and May. In 2 weeks, RCTA will be sending over 60 teachers to a CTA conference on good teaching. Some of our schools are sending other teachers out of their own school budgets. At this conference, teachers of recognized excellence, many of whom are nationally board certified, provide insight into a variety of instructional programs and issues. Mariana Robles, the RCTA Vice President, will be presenting that weekend. Stanford University is sponsoring an instructional leadership corps of outstanding teachers throughout California to address the implementation and implications of Common Core. Pia Van Meter, an RCTA high school director, is part of this effort and provides information from this work to our teachers and to those in other districts. Jamie Abali from Castleview is also involved in this project. Lastly, our executive board members are currently visiting school sites for the purpose of listening. The question being asked is simply, what can we do to help you do what you do? In a few weeks, the executive board will take a day to discuss what we heard and what we can do to help them do what they do. To support our students, RCTA sponsored the well-known, well-awarded, and Author of the Year of Children's Literature, Nikki Grimes, to spend time today at some of our schools reading to our students from her own works on the day we celebrate Read Across America. It was a great day for me personally to shuttle her around, to listen, and watch her captivate hundreds of our students. RCTA is in the midst of a book drive to provide books for children who attend Project Kid, a homeless program run by the First Congregational Church of Riverside in conjunction with UCR medical students. Those kids have gotten lots of new books from our teachers, and they continue to come in. And finally this spring, like every spring in previous years, many of our students will receive scholarships from RCTA to help them with their college tuition. I thought you might like to know about our efforts to support excellent teaching, to increase the number of excellent teachers, and to take care of our students. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good information as always. Are there any comments or questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. All right. We will now look at our consent agenda. These are items that are generally considered to be routine and are taken in one motion. The consent agenda, of course, tonight will be minus item E9, which we already voted on. Would anybody like to pull any items from the consent agenda? Mr. Hunt?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay.
I don't want to pull anything up.
Okay.
I don't necessarily want to pull anything. I would just like to comment on items E12 and E13. So it doesn't require.
Okay.
I would just, I noticed those are the employee, let's see, 12 and E13. The assignment orders, as we noticed this time, there are a lot of retirements, and I would just like to give a shout out to all of the classified and certificated personnel that are retiring. There's a great group of folks in that, and I won't dare name them or I'll I'd have to name all of them, but there are over 30 people retiring this year with probably thousands of years worth of service to RUSD. So I want to thank all of you for your service. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for...
So moved.
So moved by Tom Hunt. A second?
Second.
By Mrs. Cloud. Any other further discussion? Let's go ahead and take that vote. All right, the consent agenda does pass. Thank you very much. We've now arrived at our report discussion on Riverside STEM, an update to the Board of Education.
Good evening, President Alavi, Dr. Hansen. We're here back again from the previous board meeting. There were some questions asked, and we're here to provide you with an update that includes recommendations for Riverside STEM Academy. I know I have one slide, but I still want to hold the clicker. I wanted to just recall at the last meeting we talked about program and what kind of makes Riverside STEM Academy special and unique. So I wanted you to see that detailed in each of the school years. So for 14-15, new to the school year this year was the idea that we have interdisciplinary instruction, which means that we're planning together with different content areas that you may not see at a comprehensive high school. For example, science and English language arts. The teams are planning together, so something very special to the school. Unique also is the fact that there is a 512 program at the school. You don't have that anywhere else in our district, so I wanted to point that out as something that specializes the school. Mention coding and the integration of that, not as a separate class necessarily, but an integration into the curriculum and instruction of multiple classes such as science. The lab, where we have UCR graduate students coming and doing tutoring with our students after school, and the idea that we're going to have an advisory committee for our school as a whole that involves some highly esteemed STEM experts, parents, and other stakeholders at the school. Then for 15-16, what's new and set the school apart for 15-16? So we project Lead the Way, the engineering and technology classes. That idea of the virtual PE for 10th graders at this point.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You wish this was just a little taller, right?
Yes, indeed.
The capstone project, students would be participating in a specific class where teachers are providing them specialized tutoring. And what's special about the capstone project at STEM is that it would start in the 9th grade year and progress all the way through the 10th grade year. I'm sorry, 12th grade year. Thank you. And then the college level courses that we talked about, the progress on that is that we have a tentative date for March 10th where we're going to be collaborating with RCC faculty. Also, with respect to our UCR, we had the opportunities to submit a very initial draft of a memorandum of understanding with UCR a couple weeks ago, so it's now in their decision-making process. We have a design studio also that is going to be in place for next year, and this is like a maker space. So it's a space that'll take place in the classroom, but it's exciting and new for the 15-16 school year. And then in years out, we'll still be examining flexible scheduling. We'd like to move into the recommendations for steps in the area of access to the academy.
Good evening, Mrs. Alavi, Dr. Hansen, members of the board. Before we actually move into access, I'd like to answer the second question that we're prepared to discuss here this evening that came from the last board meeting, which was how soon can we know if the current location will be a feasible long-term expansion option? Mentioned at the last board meeting that the final report and design would be available in October of 2015. And And so that would be a complete design of what the school site would look like if in fact it was determined, A, that the location at Mount Vernon would be feasible for a long-term option, and secondly, that we would decide that that's in fact what we would want. So what I have for you are some benchmark dates that are coming up in terms of providing you updates and on a regular basis here, on a monthly basis, in terms of the surveys that are being conducted. So currently, for example, we have a topographical study that's being done, and it should be completed within the next week. And so we'll have a report to you, and that'll determine, in terms of the slope factor that's there at that Mount Vernon location and things like that, that deal with the topography, any challenges that we would have. We also have an initial Title V and CEQA review that's also near completion. It's also taking place at this time. And again, we'll have those reports to you and these updates. And it will be informing us, these reports and these surveys will be informing us as to the feasibility of that location, and we will know along the way whether we'll be learning more information to determine whether that site will in fact be a feasible long-term locale to grow the program through high school, or even larger 5-8 if we end up with another long-term solution, such as what we've been talking about with the possibility of UCR, the high school campus being at UCR, things like that. So more information to come, and you can see there some of those dates for some of those studies that we'll be bringing you updates on. The next question that encompasses various topics that have been discussed here at the board has to do with providing Riverside Unified students increased access to the Riverside STEM Academy. Some of those topics have dealt with lottery, transfer, transportation. But one thing that has come up is what are we doing and what can we do to reach out on the front end to students who are underrepresented at the STEM Academy. And so that's one of the areas that I'd like to talk about first in response to that question, in regards to what are we doing to reach out to the current fourth graders, for example, that are going to have the opportunity to apply and be part of the lottery as incoming fifth graders next year. Eighth graders and ninth graders and 10th graders. So we have current eighth graders that are headed into high school, and we've been working on the high school program. And so we need to make sure that our current eighth graders at the STEM Academy and those parents know what we have to offer at the high school level. We also have eighth graders across the district that may be interested in the STEM program. And we also have, of course, current ninth and 10th graders. And those parents at the STEM Academy are interested in knowing what are we doing in terms of the program as our children move into the 11th grade and eventually to the 12th grade. We also have students at our comprehensive high schools who, after a year or two being at the comprehensive high school, may find that, is there something else that might be better suited for me? And some of the stories that we've heard from some of the parents and students that are at STEM Academy are that, for some reason, the comprehensive program, it just, wasn't really engaging enough for my child. We brought them to the STEM Academy, they're flourishing, things like that. So we have students who, the typical comprehensive program may not be working. And so through the month of March, we are being very proactive in this outreach to the community. We are going to school sites. We are promoting the program through the school sites. We are promoting the program through parent organizations such as ELAC and PTA. Those are things that we are going to be doing primarily in this month of March. Or through the Family Resource Center. Of course, we're getting more and more parents that are coming through the Family Resource Center. Staff there doing a wonderful job. And so we want to capitalize on that and make sure that we are promoting the benefits of the Riverside STEM Academy. We also have some community meetings that we have scheduled for the month of March, both at the STEM Academy, but also in the community. So we're going to be having some community meetings in the Casablanca area, in the East Side area, and also in the area around the neighborhoods surrounding Liberty area, out in the Arlington, Attendance area. Those are some of our higher poverty areas. And of course, we're going to have those meetings both in English and Spanish, along with the phone dialers that we're going to be, that we've already started to send to our families. So those are some of the things that we have planned, that we've actually already started, and we've already had some meetings. I know a couple of you have been to one of our STEM meetings, where we targeted the parents of the students that are currently there at the STEM Academy, and of course they have a context already, and we have provided some information, answered a lot of their questions. Great questions, very well attended meeting, and a great presentation by the staff there, including the principal, Mr. Moore.
Miss, you want to wait? Thank you.
So to further answer the question in terms of how do we provide our USD students with increased access to the academy, we have those three areas that I mentioned: the areas of transportation, the area of lottery, and also transfers. And so after much discussion, study, in terms of the effects, the ramifications, positive, pros, and cons, we're bringing forth three different recommendations, and they have to do in these areas. So here they are. Number one is we are interested in providing transportation this coming year for some of our lower income students in the District of Riverside. We'd like to do this as a phase-in program. We'd like to start with three communities, the three communities that I mentioned earlier, where we are having these community meetings: the community of Casablanca, the community of Eastside, Riverside, and the community that's near Liberty Elementary School that feeds into Chemawa and Arlington. Three different areas spread from across the district, three of our highest poverty areas, and we'd like to be able to provide bus routes from those three different locales, those three different neighborhoods, to the Riverside STEM Academy, and eliminate the deterrent of distance and challenges with transportation that some of those families might have to get their students to the STEM Academy. Of course, they would have to apply in terms of the lottery and be selected, and then of course be able to then qualify for that transportation if they live in those neighborhoods. The next recommendation has to do with lottery. We really studied this a lot in terms of whether we should change the lottery, keep the lottery, do away with the lottery, and we decided that the best course at this time would be to maintain the existing lottery system. We want to not just bring equity or address the issue of representation of different student groups, but we also need a system of fair opportunity for the student populations across the district. We have a very high demand for the STEM Academy. We have a lot of different families. We have a very long waiting list, as you well know, for the incoming fifth graders. And so we want to be able to maintain a system that provides not just equity, but equality and fairness in terms of the opportunities for families, for students to be able to access this very popular, increasingly popular program, and a high-quality program as we move forward. Having said that, we are also interested in capping our inter-district transfer students at STEM. So we'd like to cap it at 20% of the school population, therefore allowing for the greater majority, 80% of the students being from RUSD now and into the future. And so I think with these recommendations and the previous slide that I mentioned in terms of the outreach and the proactive outreach that we're going to be doing with the families, we're hoping to address to some extent, and providing that access that you all have been asking about and asking for our students throughout the Riverside Unified School District. And that concludes our report, and we're open now for questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mrs. Alavi. Mr. Garcia, Ms. Lynn Carmody, going to the facilities itself, I understand we're using LPA as our advisors and all that. Obviously, this is going to begin to, when you get past programming and we get into conceptual design, we're getting into some real money. So how is LPAs retained now as I don't know how, but it seems to me that once we get into a real campus design and all of that, will that then go to bid to architects, or is that going to go right to LPA?
I think at this point, we're using the architects for the feasibility study. So past that, I believe it would have to go to bid, but the experts. Dr.
Welcome
Lewis?
back. Didn't you have back surgery?
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you. LPA is contracted to take us through the feasibility study through the conceptual plan, so it's not really design. It's just looking at the programming aspects that we want to include in the design if we move forward. So with that information on the program, and then we look at conceptually where would the relationships and adjacencies of classes and so on be located. So there's no actual design point. We'd have to move forward with a separate contract at that time.
I have no problem with LPA, and the work they've done has been very professional. I just wanted to know what point do we... Thank you, Dr. Lewis. And just a couple other questions. What's the STEM population right now? How many kids do we have? How many students do we have?
We're a little over 500 students. We're about 524 students to this today.
How many of those students are low income?
Give me a second here.
Yes, sir.
We have approximately 25% of the students who are socioeconomically disadvantaged according to free and reduced lunch.
Thank you, sir. So my question goes to transportation. I'm the one that's been, among others, been pounding the table about transportation. How did you go from transportation to only for low income? I appreciate low income transportation, believe me, but what happened to distance?
Actually, distance was another consideration for us, and we're also interested in distance, but we had to prioritize, so we decided as we phase in support that we thought that for disadvantaged students was the highest priority, and that's why you have that as your recommendation from us.
What do you mean phase in support, ma'am?
Well, we've had a lot of considerations, and we had to prioritize what we can do at this time. And so it doesn't mean that in the future it won't be a consideration. It's just that as in our initial phase, we want to make this as a recommendation.
So a bus has a certain amount of seats. I mean, why wouldn't we, are you going to look at that? If you have low-income children to apply, or they win the lottery, then I assume there's an interview, isn't there, after that?
No.
No, there's no interview. I think we should have an interview to let people know what and let parents understand what they're up against. And the rigor of this, I really highly encourage you to think about that. But I'm still concerned about just low income. And I appreciate low income. I support that, raw for you. But distance is still a concern. And Mr. Garcia, when you say that we have a waiting list, but then we're going to cap it. We're going to out of our district or 20%. Why aren't we just doing away with inter-district transfers for this school and serving our population?
That's another.
I'm not arguing. I'm just asking.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's another topic that we had quite a bit of discussion on, and we want to be able, as a district of choice, and that's how we have marketed ourselves, not just within our USD, but across the region as a district of choice. And we want to make sure that our programs reflect that, number one, and secondly, that we continue to build on this program to become a premier program in the Inland Empire. Want to make sure that it is known that throughout the Inland Empire, and so in order to do that and maintain our status as a district of choice in the community surrounding us, that was the decision that we thought was best suited for that, and still being able to again allow for 80% of our own students to be able to have that access.
Well, just I want you to know, just expressing this one board member's view, I think it's a great answer, and I appreciate that, and I voted for district of choice, and I think it's one of the attributes of RUSD and has helped RUSD. But when you add in, there's a long waiting list, and I think that citizens of RUSD, taxpayers of RUSD, children are waiting while a Moreno Valley kid is in front of them winning the lottery. I am concerned about that. So I'll continue to be, Dr. Hansen, concerned about that. And I would like, Dr. Hansen, with your concurrence, to have your staff look at some sort of interview after the child wins gets the lottery, the student does, so they really know what they're going to be up against. And that way we can cut the attrition rate, hopefully, before it starts. Thank you for the report.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. I appreciate you guys taking the time to address some of the concerns that this board has had and trying to improve the experience at STEM. And I know these are not easy questions to answer, and you're limited by funds and facilities, so I know these are difficult decisions to make, but we as a board really rely on your expertise and education to educate us, to help inform us so we can make a good decision for the student. So thank you for taking the time to do that. Really appreciate the information. With that, I have a couple questions. I know we talked about virtual PE at those workshop. Can you paint me a quick picture of what virtual PE looks like?
I'm going to ask Mr. Moore to come up and answer that question. He actually helped to write that course for RUSD.
Okay, great.
Apologize for being late. Virtual PE, I know it sounds like a funny concept. When we first were looking at virtual PE, it was, the idea is our kids are going to spend more time on the finger, doing keypadding. But it's actually a really well-built course. We selected some of the best PE teachers in the district. There was about 8 of us. At the time, I was in charge of physical education, also oversaw physical education. And so it's personalized learning in the sense the kids have units that they have to do. It meets the California state standards for physical education. They do meet with the PE teacher on a regular basis. This is just not our school, but our RVS is already using the program. And so they go through the units. There's certain times, there's certain benchmarks that they have to meet. For example, with aerobic exercise, you can actually test to see where the baseline is and then see if they're improving over time. So that's one thing that we do. And then they have to keep log books. There's certain things that they have to do throughout the program. So it's a really well-built program, like I said, from some of the best PE teachers that we have in the district. So
for example, it'd be run a mile or 400 yards or something like that.
Oh, sure.
It would have units specific to...
There's units specific to the California Standards for Physical Education.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. I really like the idea of going out into the community to educate parents and guardians about the opportunity for STEM. I was wondering if we thought anything about allowing the teachers to identify some of those students too that show an affinity for STEM education. So we can, because maybe the parents can't come to these meetings or they're not going to be at the target groups that we're trying to hit, but allowing the teacher who probably is the best person to give us input on whether or not these students have an affinity for STEM education, then maybe pinging the district or their parents or something about, hey, you need to tell your parents to go to this meeting and see if this is something you want to do. 2 more questions. One about if we're going to start to address some of these neighborhoods where the population might not speak the language or it might be learning the language, what resources currently at STEM are available to students who don't speak the language, English?
Mr. Moore, can you answer?
At STEM itself, we really don't have a lot of resources for students that don't speak the language, don't speak. Now, as far as parents, we do. Everything is translated into Spanish. Our application this year is in Spanish. But we don't, unlike, let's say, a comprehensive elementary school where they have an extra 85 minutes or 60 minutes of EL time, English learner time, minutes for that. We actually don't do that. So when they come in, we make that very clear when they come in. And that's one of the things you mentioned, Mr. Hunt, as far as making sure parents are prepared. We actually do have a meeting after they're in the lottery. We meet with new parents. We have all the teachers there. We really try to explain it clearly, both in our recruiting efforts and then afterwards to make sure that they understand even before they start school what they're getting into. But as far as EL minutes, we are aware, and our teachers are trained, or SEDI trained to understand using the methodologies of language acquisition and that kind of thing. But at the same time, we don't have like a translator on campus and that kind of thing. Now, we do have people on campus that speak Spanish, and they can help parents to help meet the need of parents. In fact, next year with our counselor, I'm hoping to have a counselor that actually is bilingual to help with those kinds of things, and I think that will help as far as our communication with parents.
Okay. I think my concern would be, that's great, we have something for parents, but if we pursue this route where we're going to try to attract a different type of student to make at least the demographics more in line with what our district looks like, if that's the approach that's being recommended here today, what steps are we going to take to change that at STEM where, if we're going out to recruit in Casablanca and the student is succeeding in learning the language but doesn't know it, and then they come to the STEM, and it sounds like now if they come to STEM, they're told there's no EL time for you. So are they just not going to be able to be successful in that situation, or would we change it so there's resources available?
Apparently, that need has not been clearly present at the STEM Academy. However, if that changes, absolutely. Our job is to respond to student needs, and so we would have to do that, and we would be obligated to do that for our students. So as it pertains, for example, to the elementary instruction, we've also, through the LCAP process, have hired quite a few translators that have been placed at different schools throughout the district. We also have district translators that we call on whenever there's some resources missing in terms of the needs that we have for our Spanish-speaking parents and other languages as well, as a matter of fact. But yeah, absolutely, we would be responding to the needs of the students that show up to the school.
Okay, I'm still a little bit concerned by what we just heard, because if a student has come previously, they're told through this process while they're allowed to come that basically we're setting them up to fail if there's no resources there. So shouldn't we put the resources in place prior to the students coming there?
If we have an EL student that requires extra support, we would have to do so prior. For example, if there's a bilingual aid necessary or some other area like that, we would have to.
I just want to make sure there's a support system in place and that it's not the student comes and then we're trying to fulfill the need after they're there, and in the meantime they get lost in the shuffle. And then my last question has to do also with the interdistrict transfer, and we've had a lot of dialogue about this, and I understand the recommendation, but I do have a problem with it too when we have a long waiting list. I'm not saying we should kick out any of the kids there, Mr. Miller, don't worry about that. But going forward, something to evaluate, how did you come up with the 20%, and what percentage of our current students in the entire district are in interdistrict transfers, and is that in line with what the STEM school has currently?
Yeah, and again, another topic of great discussion, and currently we actually do have about 20% of the students in the STEM Academy are interdistrict transfers. 80% approximately, again, are from within.
What about the entire district? What does RUSD look like? How many interdistrict transfers are a percentage of our population?
Mr. Why don't you come up to the podium, please?
Yeah, if memory serves me correct, and I can get this information for you more accurately, we're in the neighborhood of about 2,000 transfers coming in and about 1,300 students leaving the district, to an increase of our numbers in the neighborhood of 700 students.
Okay, sorry,
percentage-wise, that it would not be.
It would not be in line.
Not
So
proportional.
I'd be inclined to be in more support of a cap that's more in line with the rest of our schools. At least to be in line with that, to allow more students that are on our current waiting list to have access to the school. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Cloud. Well, I would like to thank you very much. It seems like every board meeting we have a new iteration of the STEM Academy, and I want to thank you. We envisioned this, about 4 years ago, and as we have learned so clearly, the devil is in the details. I want to thank you for taking the considerations that we gave at the time, for providing answers, and I think good answers to some of those questions. How I think we can address some of these needs is, I don't think this has to be the only STEM academy. I think we can do other things in the district. And so I would like for us to be thinking outside the box, to address some of the needs that we're kind of backfilling with transportation and all of that. This is a wide open field, and we have lots of possibilities. I would say that I appreciate the commitment that we've made, and I want to assure the parents, because it must get awfully tiresome to you to every month have a new meeting where new questions come up. And this board member is committed to the STEM Academy and to those students that are there. And I think what we're trying to do is refine, some of our commitment, but it's unchanging in that we are committed to the STEM Academy. I think that the transportation opportunities were well addressed. I think I would remind my fellow board members that being a district of choice actually saved us in the last few years through the lean budget times, and now we have the residual issue of students from other districts residing and using our programs, but we do get ADA for them, and they did come in and support our programs when times were lean. So I think we can tweak the numbers, but I think that those parents have a certain expectations, and we gave them a certain obligation when they came in. I think we need to, I do have a question about, we have other schools of choice besides the STEM Academy, and are you looking at this template to kind of, I realize that there's not the waiting list of other schools as there is at STEM, but is this template kind of going to foster what we do at other schools too, like cap interdistrict transfers, maintaining a lottery system and that kind of thing? Is that pretty clear what we're doing across the district now for DLI and core knowledge and all?
We're kind of trying to figure out who's going to answer the question, but I'll answer at least, and maybe you can expand on this. One of the things that we need to make sure that we're aware is that the other programs that we have that are choice programs are programs within another school. The STEM Academy is unique in that sense, in that this is a specialty school. The entire school is its own specialty program. And so just as we're trying to maintain parity with some of those programs of choice, there are certain factors that we also need to treat somewhat differently, because the entire school is made up of transfers, whether they're internal to our USD or, of course, coming in from the outside. So that has been with part of the discussions that we've had.
Well, this has been a road filled with a few bumps, and as you know, Bryant is a whole school, core knowledge is a whole school program as well, but it's a little different than STEM. So I really do want to thank you. I think that looking at kind of the details like you have really does fulfill the LCFF requirements of the focus that we need to have, and I think we're trying to do that. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we're on the road. I don't know that I think an interview of parents, maybe interview is too strong a word. I think we need to have an informational opportunity so parents know what's required. And I think we've said several times before that when you have a specialty school, you don't necessarily get everything you want like you would in a comprehensive school, because it is a specialty school. So I think parents need to understand that too, that this is not going to fulfill every sports need or whatever need they have. And with that said, I think, you're doing a good job of kind of tweaking it along the way, and I know you'll keep bringing information back to us. And congratulations. I think you've done a good job.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Lock-Dawson?
Thank you, Ms. Alavi. Thank you, Mr. Garcia, Ms. Carmen Day. I really appreciate it that you put so much thought into this. And I have to say, I fully support your recommendations. I don't think I would change them at all, with maybe a little bit of one. But I do appreciate the decisiveness with which you bring these forward. There's a little bit of risk associated with that, and I want you to know that I recognize that. But this is exactly the type of thing this kind of board member was looking for. I don't want to dither. I think we need to make some decisions to address some of the problems that we have or issues and things that we can bite off and chew and swallow, move forward. I did have a question. Does the transportation money, are we using some of our LCAP money to provide that, or will we be able to program the LCAP money for those particular populations to provide transportation? I don't know. Or have you thought about that? Because that could
it
hit
definitely
a whole
would be potential.
Yeah, I mean, because that would kind of go to Mr.
Because it
Hunt's
definitely
thing.
would work towards proportionality. So that would.
I mean, because that is one of the things we're trying to do with our LCAP is target those populations, and they happen to be some of the more underrepresented ones at the school as well. So I do think using that money in that program to help. The only thing about that I would maybe even talk about or have a discussion about on the CAP is that I know the waiting lists are ridiculously long in 5th, 6th, and starts to edge out around 7th. So there's the potential, if we gave it a little bit more thought, to have a sliding scale or a progressive cap, so that at the higher levels you allow more kids from out of the area, but at the lower grades where the competition is so fierce, it might be a little bit less. I don't know what that looks like, but I just wanted to throw it out there. That
We did discuss that
Did
a
you?
little bit because it may deter some students from, we may not have the continuance of students
Mhm.
that way, but we did.
Yeah, because I mean, they don't have to go through the lottery every year. Once you're in, you're in. So I mean, it doesn't matter as you get going on. But yeah, I know
Inviting people from outside and then, or later, maybe less appealing as the 5A program. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that.
You know what I mean? Coming in
impacts.
earlier is more
Yeah.
appealing to continue versus coming in later
Yes,
potentially.
yes. I get that. But it might also change the dynamic. It might also change the conversation within our district too, and outside of it. The other thing about that is I like the idea of keeping the lottery. I think I mentioned that in my last comments, was that I don't want to monkey with quotas or any of that sort of thing, but I do think stepping up our efforts to reach out to groups that are not represented there is really important. One last thing I wanted to ask, and this is a question perhaps for Mr. Moore, I don't know, but I was talking to a number of the 10th grade parents the other day, and have you had just a specific little powwow with those parents about, because one of they were saying things about, this, they were unhappy with this, or their child was this, and they were I think the comment was, I don't want to keep coming to sessions and hear about what the kids behind me are going to get. I need, my child is now in 10th grade and I need to know what you're doing for him right now. So maybe just even having a parent night for just your 10th graders, or those pioneers that have been brave enough to hang with us, that yes, indeed, you're on our radar. Have you, I don't know if you've done that, Mr. Moore, but I presume
we
you
did.
haven't.
Well, the meeting that, in fact, you were at was really targeted not just at 9th grade parents, but actually at 10th grade parents.
Mhm.
You noticed in that meeting, so for those who didn't know, we had a parent night it was really targeted for parents, current parents of high school parents, and also we invited the 8th grade parents who'd want to know what we're doing. And that meeting was actually not just about what the ones coming up. We didn't even talk about a new building, for example, 5, 6, 10 years from now. What that was about was talking about the program, because we revised the program considerably, which you all saw for each grade level, which includes the 10th graders, which includes an engineering elective, engineering technology elective, which includes an advisory, so where they have some time to work on their capstone projects and other kinds of things such as intervention. It includes the PE and those kinds of things. And we also talked about the short-term plan as far as building, and that affects everybody. For example, we're getting the 2 chemistry labs labs in there. So, I mean, I hear from parents a lot. And,
I know you do.
And that's
so I feel like I'm not telling you anything you don't know.
Parents are supposed to advocate for their kids as they should. And they have, that first group also has very specific concerns, but we really have tried to work with that first group to make sure they're having a good experience. We're doing quite a bit as far as reaching out to other middle schools and high schools, and we're using that group to do that. So, we have this group of teachers that we have in the high school has worked out extremely well. Something that we talk about. I meet with them 2 or 3 days a week. And we talk about the issues, what kids are saying, what parents are saying, what's been said out in the parking lot, which may or may not be true.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was suggesting it. And I will say, the parent that was talking to me said her child was hearing from his friends at the comprehensive high schools and how wonderful everything was. And he was really struggling at STEM and flunking out and not doing very well in his classes. But his friend who went over here has got better grades and all those other things. And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe you need to have a difficult discussion with your son about maybe this is not the right fit either. So, I mean, I do want to make it work and reward the parents who have put themselves out there and the children that they've put in, this pioneer program. I think we have to have a way to help them. So
Right.
that's all. That's the only concern.
And so, just if I could just address the one issue there.
Yeah.
So, one thing as far as looking at the students that were struggling, for example, this year they had 2 AP classes to offer, and so we really listened to that. And so, if you can remember back again, we don't have the chart in front of you, but we have the 2 options. So now they can choose an option of the most rigorous to it's still a rigorous program. But we're really looked and listened to that kind of thing. We have listened to, so for example, as far as being able to get to their school sites on time, trying to make sure we plan a schedule. Their home school if they're playing sports at their home school. We look at our schedule to make sure that they have time to get to their home schools. And so, we try to address as many of the needs as we can. It is a school of choice. We can't provide everything as was mentioned already. But I don't take any of the comments or that parents make and just kind of toss them aside. We really listen to them, and we discuss them all the time, and try to do everything that we can to meet as many needs as we can.
Well, and that's kind of the beauty of our district too. I encouraged her to look into Riverside Virtual School, perhaps, if that was a better fit for her, or and I had to assure her that as a parent of 2 kids at comprehensive high schools, or one at Virtual High School, it isn't all that great over there either, so I think it's good. Anyway, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring up a few points. Going back to what Mrs. Cloud said about choice, I think we have forgotten as a board possibly why the choice program went into effect. To open it up to kids outside the district had a very logical and realistic choice. I'm not sure we're willing to do away with that option of not having outside kids come in through this choice lottery system. I understand that the charter school is going to be slated to maybe take 200 of our kids. Okay, that's 200 kids, ADA, we're not going to have. Now, it's not all about money, but when you think about it, that's 200 kids less. We are in declining enrollment at that point. The choice program was designed to not only be an exceptional choice program, unique, very elevated, but it was also designed to fill that gap, and it did so very well. So this 20% is kind of hokey for me, unless you want to rethink the whole concept of a choice program and what a choice program really is there for. Also, let me just say, I don't think it makes any sense to do 20% for the high school. So when you say STEM school 20%, I think you better back off the high school, because the high school is not going to fill its spots. So what are you going to do? You're going to go down the list, you're going to have an opening for part of that 20%, but you won't have someone in that 20% to fill. The details of how that 20% work with the reality of having a lottery list and pushing people in and out is very difficult. You're never going to get that exact 20% is what I'm trying to say. It would be better if you would have a range that you would try to stay in, whether that be 18 to 21% or something like that. Because what's going to happen is kids come in and they get put on this waiting list in a random order, whatever their lottery number is. So you've got kids. You may be going down 25 kids to get the next kid that fits that requirement. And just make sure that you're aware that that really defeats your lottery system. You're really working around your lottery system at that point. And it's okay. I think it's okay to give RUSD kids the preference for sure, but I think we need to rethink the rigidity of that 20%, make sure that we understand it. And when it comes to the high school, if we're trying to get high school kids just to sign up, I don't see the point in that at all. Yeah, don't see it. So really endorse your presentation, very much endorse all the things that you've been saying about the changes that you've outlined. I think we are moving towards a position where STEM is going to be that unique school. I'm really happy with your efforts at getting MOUs with our different universities and our community colleges. I think that's what's going to make it different. But always, it will never be a regular school. And I don't think we ought to try to pretend it's going to be a regular school. I also think that maybe we ought to, and maybe Mr. Moore can talk to this as well, we don't really have a system there for kids that don't succeed, because it's a choice program and they're there voluntarily. But this school isn't for everybody. And I think it's realistic and honest of us to say this is a very highly academic program and not every child can meet it. There are going to be kids there who work hard, who are from disadvantaged backgrounds, who are going to do fine because they're hard workers. There are going to be kids there from non-disadvantaged backgrounds who are not going to do fine because they're not hard workers. This program is difficult. So I think we should be aware that the great thing about our district is that we're going to be offering these different options for these different kids to fit in. And I agree with Mrs. Cloud, we need more programs in different parts of the district so that we don't have to feel like those poor people in Lake Matthews who can't get to the school. Let's put something down near Lake Matthews, a premier program that we can build in. But I don't know that masterminding this STEM school down to the last little percent is going to really work really well in the actual working day. But again, I think you're doing great work. I think we're off to the right track. I know you've tried very hard to answer all of our worries and all of our concerns, and I thank you for that. And thank you very much for the presentation. Anybody else? All right.
Can I
Thank
say
you
one
very
thing
much.
just as we wrap
Sure.
up? I do want to say that we have a very nice advisory committee that's looking at STEM district-wide so that we do have a sequential progression of highly quality work with trained professionals that have a lot of experience in that area. So that is something that we've talked about from the start, that we're looking at putting a program in place that's sequential through all K-12 schools.
Good. That's going to be exciting. Thank you very much. And now we've come to our public hearing, item G, and I would like to ask Mr. Hunt to speak up.
Yes, Mrs. Alabi, thank you, President Alabi. Thank you for your comments. Those are very good. This item and H1 have always, in my now 8 years, have always come before the Operations Committee, so they had time to vet it, and speakers that were for or against it had more time than is allowed, respectfully, at a board meeting. So, and Mr. Lee and I are concerned that it did not come before us. We understand that Dr. Lewis was was out, and I'm glad to see him back, but he was out, and but there were other people that were taking his place that could have scheduled an Operations Committee meeting. So I would move, if you'll accept a motion on this, I would move to table this item until our next board meeting. I understand it needs to be the March meeting, so I know it's a workshop, so I would ask for a board meeting in front of that, and allow the Operations Committee, with Dr. Lewis's work, to meet and vet this and be able to come back and talk about this issue in more detail. This is the one time we actually assess something on our community, and I think it deserves more than what it's received this time, which was short notice. So that is my motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second. Okay, we'll open that up for discussion. Yes.
Motion to table is not.
Yeah.
No discussion.
That's correct. If the motion is to table it, then we bring it back to the very next meeting, and then it'll be discussed at that time. So there's no discussion today, the motion. You have to vote to whether to table it and bring it back in 2 weeks before our study session. And then we can, in the meantime, if I heard Mr. Hunt's request, then it goes to the Operations Subcommittee in the next 2 weeks, and then that'll be the normal protocol that has happened in the past.
So we can't learn any more information about this?
Well, not in light of the motion that just given.
All right,
Motion
then we will
fails.
now take a vote on tabling the motion, which does not allow us to discuss it. All right, that does pass, and so those items G1 and H1 are tabled.
So just for staff to clarify, if I heard you correctly, Mr. Hunt, we will then bring this forward at we will have, instead of, we'll still have our study session, but we'll have this one public hearing and action item to begin with, but between now and then, you'd like to see an Operations Subcommittee scheduled.
Yes, sir. I understand the importance, and I appreciate, as I think my colleagues do, these study sessions. So I know Mr. Lee and I, along with Dr. Lewis and his staff, will work very hard to summarize and make our observations. We need for Dr. Lewis to meet with Mr. Lee and I tonight, just to look at dates and see what works.
And so then the next meeting, that study session, Mrs. Alavi, you and I will work together. We'll have a brief public hearing, just like G1, and then we'll have an action item, H1.
Mr. Miller, apparently we just tabled your item. Would you still like to speak to it?
It's 2 weeks from today, March the, do you know the date?
Thank you.
Yeah. March the 16th is when this will come back.
It's open to the public.
March the 16th. That'll be the next board meeting where we take action on this item.
That will be the
subcommittee?
committee. That'll be the committee meeting.
That will be the committee meeting. That hasn't been scheduled yet.
But it is public, and we do post it. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Then we're going to be moving along on our action calendar. Item number H2, resolution of the Board of Education of RUSD to approve the reduction or discontinuance of a particular kind of certificated service. Mrs. Mills.
Thank you. Our resolution of Board of Education approved the reduction or discontinuance of particular kinds of certificated services is being submitted for board approval. And this year, we sent out some early notices of separation to staff to turn in if they were retiring, and Mrs. Cloud referred to those on the personnel consent agenda today, and 51 people turned those in. So we were able tonight to only bring you a total impact of 0.2 certificated staff, and that's a 0.2 in Chinese. So that's a better story than a few years ago.
That is, you're absolutely right about that.
So I just need you to take action on this resolution, please.
Okay.
Second.
Moved for approval by Mrs. Lockdawson, seconded by Mr. Hunt. Any further comment? Please vote. Mr. Hunt?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Allen.
Okay, thank you. That motion does pass. Thank you. Okay, H3, resolution of the Board of Education declaring its intent to issue tax-exempt bonds to be used to reimburse the school district for expenditures for the Ramona High School theater modernization prior to the issuance of tax-exempt bonds. Mr. Fine.
Thank you. Good evening, Mrs. Alavi, Dr. Hanson, and members of the board. I'm going to speak to H3 and H4 together with respect to just background information. These are two facility improvement projects that the board is very well aware of, the Ramona Theater and the STEM Academy. Both potentially will require additional funding beyond what we have on hand today, and that may come in the future with regard to, for example, a general obligation bond measure. The two resolutions that are before you tonight would allow us to move forward with those projects, spend money on those projects, but then have the flexibility to be reimbursed at a later date from the proceeds of the tax-exempt financing, such as a general obligation bond. It doesn't mean you have to do it, but if you don't take this action ahead of starting construction on either of these projects, or the feasibility study, for example, or the relocatable labs at STEM as an example, then you don't get that option later on. And so in some respects, it's a safeguard to give you a choice once construction is started. So I would recommend to you resolution number 27, which is H3 for the Ramona High School theater modification, and then I'll come back and recommend 28 as well.
Thank you. Mrs. Lockdawson, did you have a comment? No? Mr. Hunt, do you have a comment?
Yeah. I think we're committed to both these projects. It's sort of like we've already had the debate. This is just Mr. Fine's doing what he's supposed to do. He's bringing forward now the apparatus or the vehicle for us to pay for these things. Even last meeting, we talked about the Ramona Theater, answering some of Mrs. Cloud's queries on it. So I would, unless there's any questions, and when you're ready, I would move for approval.
If you could just hold off
Yes,
1
ma'am, I
minute.
will.
Mrs. Cloud?
Well, again, if for some untoward reason we don't pass a bond, what happens then?
So specifically so the answer will be different for each of the projects. So for Ramona Theater, we have fully funded the project from two sources. One being the final proceeds from the election of 2001, Measure B, and adding to that to fill the gap in the total estimated project cost would be from redevelopment funds.
Right.
Fully funded was not the original plan to use redevelopment funds for that project. However, they are eligible to be used for that project. This would give you the option, should you do a future financing, that you could come back and reimburse the expenditure of the redevelopment funds.
Okay.
Project moves forward as planned, as budgeted, simply gives you an option later to move those more restricted funds, or previously more restricted funds in the redevelopment world, to back to some other purpose. And the theater project would be clearly an eligible project, depending on how you structure it, for a future tax-exempt financing. With regard to STEM, the equation's just a little bit different. So we have funding on hand for what you've already approved by way of the two labs and the feasibility study, but not necessarily if the feasibility study were to say the long-term solution is XYZ and I want to move forward on that, or even the second year additional facility improvements that we've discussed with the board, those funds would have to be found. And so again, it would allow you, for what you've already approved by way of the two relocatable buildings that are on order and be under design right now, and the feasibility study, to eventually be reimbursed at a later time. The funds currently planned to be used for Those two items are community facility district funds.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain that motion now. Mr. Hunt?
Thank you, Ms. Alavi. Then I would move approval on, I'm sorry, my book.
H3.
H3, thank you.
And a second by Mr. Lee. For any further discussion? Let's go ahead and vote.
Good question. Yeah, good. Thank you, Mrs. Cloud. Good question.
Mrs. Cloud, you need to vote.
Oh, sorry, I did, but...
Oh, it didn't come through.
It's not coming through.
Okay, what was your vote, please?
Huh? Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then we will also take H4. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second by Mr. Lee. Any further discussion? Okay, let's take a vote on H4. Thank you.
Maybe there's a short in it.
Yeah. Thank you. Both of those do indeed pass. And now, Mr. Fine, if you want to keep going forward on the repeal of language contained in Senate Bill 858.
Thank you, Mrs. Alavi. Item H5, which is Resolution 1415, number 29, is a resolution of the Board of Education of the district calling upon the California Legislature and the Governor to repeal the language contained in Senate Bill 858 from last year, specifically Section 27 and its related education code. The board's had many discussions, and you've heard from myself and others about our concern about the last-minute language that was inserted in the budget trailer bill last June by the administration and adopted by the legislature to set caps on local reserves for school districts. So as the board's aware, we have minimum requirements for our reserves. This actually imposes a cap on our reserve. This resolution would call upon the governor and the legislature to repeal that one section of Senate Bill 858 and not have those reserve caps.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Alavi. I rode back on the plane last week from Sacramento with CSBA President Jesus Hoguin, and they are taking the lead on this. This is very important. It hamstrings districts and needs to be something that we support. We're looked at as one of the leading districts on this too. So I would move for approval of Resolution 1529.
Thank you. Mrs. Cloud?
I second that, and I would request that we let the RCSBA President Director know that we've taken action, because that was something they requested. So,
Mr. Newberry,
yes.
Is it right?
No. Mr. Newberry Bauman.
Yeah, sorry, you're right.
Any further comments? All right, let's take a vote on that, please. Thank you. That does indeed pass. And you're still up, Mr. Fine.
Thank you, Mrs. Salvi. Item H6 is Board Policy 3470, Debt Management Policy. It is a first reading with respect to recommended revisions in the policy. As the board is aware, REOSD took the lead on developing a policy of this nature several years ago, and as we have worked with it over the last several years and several financings, we've just discovered in some cases some minor things that we believe need to be revised, but the main focus of the revisions that we recommend to you tonight for the first reading would be around the topic of disclosure, both initial disclosure and continuing disclosure. As the board is aware, and this is fresh on your mind because we just did a refunding transaction that you approved in December of roughly $40 million for a series of community facility districts. You got a great big packet that night of material, and included in there are initial disclosures of a preliminary official statement that ultimately became a final official statement a month later as we continue to make revisions to it. And in there were covenants that you as a board adopted and agreed to with regard to continuing disclosure. The areas of adequate and thorough disclosure have been the subject of a number of SE C, Securities and Exchange Commission enforcement actions across the country against public agencies in the last several years, but really heightened attention in the last year. And so we just felt we had a model policy in this regard, and that it was important to continue in that regard by ensuring that it was up to speed. And so with your permission, I will walk through each page and highlight the changes and why the change. Starting on page 221, first page of the policy, paragraph 2. These terms were already defined up above under the position statement, so we're simply removing the duplicate definitions. That's all we're doing here. Page 223, it is actually under paragraph 7, authorization, small b, short-term debt. And again, it's a definition. We've already defined the term trans on the first page as tax and revenue anticipation notes, so we're changing that. Same with small c, item 4 on that same page. Those terms were already defined early on. So those are just minor format matters. At the top of page 225, the policy refers to community facility district. As a district, as RUSD, we have multiple community facilities district, and so we're simply making the term plural. With respect to the bottom of 225 in section 11, financing team members, we emphasize here again just a matter of format, the independent financial advisor as opposed to just financial advisor. Continuing on page 226, small b, bond counsel. Bond counsel is not only responsible for preparing the board resolutions and providing tax advice, but all of the bond documents themselves, outside of what disclosure counsel may prepare. Under small f in that same section, other team members, we are adding specifically continuing disclosure dissemination agent and or continuing disclosure review consultant. And we're also adding reserve surety policy provider. The first edition, the continuing disclosure dissemination agent and or continuing disclosure review consultant, are really at the heart of the changes that I'm about to review with you. The reserve surety policy provider, for the first time in the district's public finance endeavors this past transaction that we did for these CFDs, did we use a reserve surety policy provider. And so when we first wrote the policy, that wasn't something that we were had any history at that point of using a provider like that. However, we did in this last transaction. And what we're doing in this regard is for every debt you enter into, you must hold money in reserve equal to a year of payment on that debt. And in this case, of those $40 million of CFD bonds, it would have required us to hold $4 or $5 million of proceeds that we borrowed and paying interest on in reserve. And so what we did is we went out and bought an insurance policy for that purpose instead. And that's what this is a reserve. So instead of the reserves, we have a reserve surety or insurance provider policy matter, and simply was more cost effective to buy the insurance policy instead of holding the reserves and paying interest on the reserves. Section 13, which previously said financial disclosure, now is a broader term of disclosure requirements, and this is the heart of the changes on page 227 that we're recommending. First, in paragraph A, we simply define Rule 15C-212, which is the Securities and Exchange Commission regulation that deals with disclosure. Paragraph B, we add a new paragraph. B, C, D, E are all going to be new, and I won't read every word, but I'll give you a short synopsis. B is simply to highlight the importance of disclosure. C is to establish a district review team with regard to a team of folks that would review the documents that we're preparing. That would include somebody from the superintendent's office, the deputy superintendent, business service and government relations, our facilities department, and the district's general counsel. Important here is that Any comments from the disclosure review team should be provided in writing to the entire finance team of professionals. And that they may ask for assistance from others as needed. That gets back to the dissemination consultant. Should there be a need to have somebody, for example, go out and research bond rating changes, that may not be a resource that we can do in-house, and therefore need to hire somebody to do that. Paragraph D is also new and focuses on the initial disclosure, which would be the preliminary official statements and the final official statements, and that they would be reviewed by the district's disclosure review team prior to the Board of Education approving them, and that they would always appear before the board, as has been our practice, on your action calendar, not on a consent calendar. So the idea that they wouldn't be put in a group of items that you're taking as a whole, but would be individual agenda items, and that has been our practice all along. New paragraph E deals with the second type of disclosure, and that's the continuing disclosure that we make on a semi-annual or annual basis, depending upon the covenants that we've entered into. The first is that we should designate a continuing disclosure agent to regularly monitor that. And in all of our documents and in all of our history, we have a continuing disclosure agent. In that process, we just simply didn't call them out and their duties out in the policy. We now do that. And you can see under paragraph E, subparagraph 2, items 1 through 7, you can see what those duties would be, specifically monitoring rating changes and reporting those and disclosing those within 10 business days, both on ourselves, rating agencies of the district, and also rating agencies of underlying insurance or sureties, whether that be the reserve surety I just described to you, or actually the bond insurance that we have regularly purchased in the past. Those would be two examples. And then also 6 and 7 there, identify incidents of noncompliance and prepare a report to the disclosure review team with regard to on how to cure any noncompliance with regard to reporting. So if we miss something, identify that we missed it, and then how do we correct that or cure it. In paragraph 7, specifically to review and certify any disclosure in the POS and the OS regarding district compliance and non-compliance within the last 5 years. So if you looked carefully at the most recent preliminary official statement that came before you in December as an example, and the final official statement that was published later, you will see that there's actually pages in there that describe for every issuance the district has over the last 5 years if we have any non-compliance matters, such as filing a continuing disclosure report late, which would be an example. Those make up the changes to Policy 3470 and would recommend your consideration for first reading.
Mr. Hunt.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Elvey. Mr. Fine, could you just help me on a couple of things? In 13C, you talk about the district review team. It includes the district's general counsel. However, in 12B and C, we talk about appointing, selecting through an RFP process a bond counsel. Would these two be in conflict, or why don't we just have the bond counsel be on this district review team?
It's really to set it up so that they can be separate. And even in most firms that have bond counsel work and other types of work, those attorney groups or practice areas don't necessarily work with one another on a regular basis. So the importance of general counsel being involved in the district review team is that they're going to be more knowledgeable about the district and its activities, pending litigation maybe against the district and so on, where bond counsel is really, their duties are defined up in 11 with respect to actually preparing documents related to a transaction as opposed to an overall view of the district. So we're looking to general counsel to have that overall view of the district and be part of that team that reviews all of our documentation.
I think that's a very thorough answer. Thank you. And lastly, just I like your continuing disclosure agent. Is that done through an RFP? And what cost do you think that would run us annually?
We do some of these services through RFPs. Actually, there's a great benefit that when you have the amount of debt instruments that RUSD has by way of numbers, not dollar amount, but actual numbers, it makes sense to have one party do them all because the disclosures for one document, with the exception of heading on them, with the exception of the heading, are going to look just like the disclosure for the next document, and so on. And so having one firm do all of them and having consistency is really important. Currently, and for a long time, U.S. Bank has been our disclosure agent. And you would look to, and there are only a handful of these folks out there that actually take these documents, prepare the disclosure, and then file them with the municipal rulemaking bodies, municipal finance rulemaking bodies, using their online databases. And so cost, I would have to look one up, Mr. Hunt, but the initial cost to establish those relationships, for example, is probably in the $25,000 range, and then there's an annual fee associated to it to actually do the semi-annual or annual preparation of the document and filing it.
So, and I appreciate that, Mr. Fine, and thank you. Is someday when you and I aren't here, would a board misinterpret and have a different group than what you just talked about? We would have U.S. Bank today.
Could easily. There are a handful of firms that do it. Okay. Not a great number. I would, without doing some calling around, I would guess U.S. Bank does the majority of municipal financing dissemination work, certainly on the West Coast. But any institution that does that type of work certainly would be available. And they are, nowhere in the policy is U.S. Bank called out. It's obviously just simply one of the finance team members.
Good clarification. Thank you.
Mrs. Lock-Dawson?
Mr. Fine, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. Did you, does the SEC have any guidelines or anything that they've given you on how to revise policies for this? Or I mean, I know that you deal with this on a day-to-day basis. I'm just looking for a double check on making sure we're compliant and that we're making sure that what we've proposed here is not going to get us into deeper trouble at some point and that sort of thing.
So the SEC certainly doesn't. They issue their rule, and specifically in this topic, Rule 15 C212, which has been around for many, many years, a long time. This is a very complicated area, and so what does compliance really look like? It's been automated in part over the years. I remember when we prepared all these reports, and we sent them to depositories who actually put the report on a shelf so that bondholders that may own our bonds could contact the depository to get a copy of it or to go in and look at it. I mean, that was the old days, which actually wasn't too many years ago. Mm-hmm. Because what you're trying to do through this process, inform your bondholders of the status of their securities. And so you don't want to send these out to every bondholder. Number one, we don't know who they all are because we don't keep the registry of that. Somebody else does. And so now it's all automated and is online, and anybody can go in and look at it. Mm-hmm. So the SEC's guidance would be, here's the rule, follow the rule.
Okay. So how did you come up with the language of the policy? That's what I was just asking. Was that just your...
So bond counsel drafted, and I drafted an outline mm-hmm. of topics to talk about. Mm-hmm. And of where we thought there were some weaknesses in our original two paragraphs in this policy on this disclosure, and I crafted the language around that outline, and then distributed it to Disclosure Counsel, Bond Counsel, Dissemination Agent, Tax Advisor, Financial Advisor. I distributed it to basically the core group of the finance team and said, do you have any comments? And they picked it apart. For example, I put 10 days in, and Underwriters Council reminded me it's 10 business days.
Okay.
And so I went back.
That's fine. It was vetted by the group.
It was vetted by
that is well versed.
8 or so folks.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further comment? I'll entertain a motion. It has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Go ahead and vote. That does pass. Thank you, Mr. Fine. We're ready now for the second period interim financial report.
Thank you, Mrs. Alavi. Moving on to a different topic, and this would be the 2014-15 second period interim financial report. As the Board of Education is aware, state law requires that once we've adopted a budget prior to July 1, that subsequent to that we must take a close look and revise our budget at a minimum of twice during the year. The first one is the first period interim financial report, which the board considered in December. It is updates to the budget up to that point in time and any reflection of actual data through the end of October. The second period interim report is the exact same report, same format, everything, except that it is actuals through the end of January, updating budget data really up till when we prepared this last week. As noted in staff's report, the board's finance subcommittee, Mrs. Alavi and Mr. Hunt, reviewed this on February 20th and does recommend approval to you tonight. Although format is identical, the real drivers behind changes that are reflected in the first interim versus second interim are very different. The first interim is your official budget update since the point in time that you adopted the budget back in June. And you have to stop, pause, and think about what we know in June. We adopted a budget before the state adopted their budget, and they control really everything we deal with regard to revenue. We adopted it before we knew final enrollment and ADA. We adopted it before we had final staffing in place. All of those things were assumptions made back in April and May when that June budget was prepared. When we get to the first interim report that you see in December, much of that now is known. Not with absolute precision yet, because we still have the rest of the year to get through. But we know so much more than what we knew in June. And so typically at your first interim report, you see a lot of changes, dollar value changes, between the best estimates that we had done in the spring and truing those up. At the second interim, this is now reflective of just over halfway through the school year, and you're seeing just minor changes. You see the same, you see changes, but the dollar values of those changes are much more minor. In fact, most of the time driven by any new grants that weren't anticipated last spring, and you'll see that tonight, and by any adjustments that schools and departments have made as they have progressed through the year. So included in the package that's in your agenda is the actual and projected financial and budgetary data in the state required format, the standards and criteria in the state required format, actual and projected cash flows, multi-year projections, and the district certification. And I'm going to walk you through a summary of that. As you know, everything that we do, both revenue and expense, is driven by caseload, and caseload for us is enrollment and also average daily attendance, which is what our revenue is based on. We do have some changes in enrollment and average daily attendance, but these are technical changes. We believe that the changes we brought to you at first interim actually are pretty solid. But the footnote here is really the change. Previously, this chart excluded students that are at the County Office of Ed, may be enrolled in community school programs or at the County Office of Ed. We have updated this chart now to include those students. And the reason for that is under the new funding formula of LCFF, under the old funding formula of revenue limits, the money for those students went directly to the county. So if the county of Riverside County Office of Ed were serving 10 RUSD students in their community school, they received money for those 10 students directly from the state, which is why we excluded those 10 students from our report. They weren't driving financial data from us. Under new LCFF, we account for those 10 students. We receive the money, and then the county bills us for services, and we pay them. And so the reason it's being reflected here is that they're now part of our base, and as those numbers go up and down, they impact our revenues up and down. These particular changes, again, are technical in nature. The county, in an initial report to us last spring reflected, I think, far more students from RUSD than what were actually there. As we worked through and audited those lists of students, we discovered a number of them, 47 specifically, were not Riverside Unified students. And so ultimately that has a financial impact because it will lower our revenue. It also lowers our expense. Format is identical as I move through here. You see the adopted budget. You see the changes we brought you in December. You see the changes we're bringing you tonight. And the totals from December, the totals for tonight, and then the change is simply a reflection on the change from December to tonight. So in our local control funding formula, we are dropping by roughly $800,000. This is directly related to what I just explained to you by students at the county. We have fewer students at the county than what were originally reported last spring. No changes in federal revenue, no changes in other state revenue, and a minor change in local revenue, specifically acknowledging some procurement rebates and payment by REACH Charter School for special ed services and the sale of some obsolete textbooks. To the restricted revenue side of the house, we do have some positive changes here of additional revenue, specifically related to several grants. One, federal entitlement that we get each year, special ed local assistance. This is a $600,000 adjustment. There was an estimate made, and now we have the actual number that Washington will be sending us. The next two items that are listed, California Math and Science Project and Federal Perkins, these are both new grants that we have received since we brought you the last report in December. And you can see that California Math and Science is actually a 3-year grant of roughly $600,000 a year. You see the first $600,000 reported here, and you see roughly $400,000 being reported for Perkins. No changes in restricted state revenue, and again, very minor change in restricted local revenue, specifically, again, related to 2 new grants that we've received since December. Shifting gears from revenue to expenses, you see the explanation here for all of these relatively minor changes are either augmentations or transfers. What's going on at this time of the year is schools and departments may have originally had budget on one line, and their needs have changed, and now they need to move those resources to a different budget line, and that's the transfer. And in the case of augmentations, there may be some special needs going on in a variety of departments or schools where we're augmenting the budget to meet that need, some unanticipated activity or item of expense. On the restricted side of the expenditures, you see some of the same explanations, but here you see the Perkins grant with respect to salaries and benefits and books and supplies and operating supplies and capital all having an influence, and you see the California Math and Science Project also having an influence here in the books and supplies. Again, relatively minor changes. All those put together then impact our forecasted ending fund balance for June 30th of 15, and that is a decrease of $1 million in our fund balance on the unrestricted side and no change on the restricted side of the fund balance. That same $1 million is reflected on deficit spending. We are increasing our deficit spending by $1 million for those exact same reasons, which is why the fund balance is going down, and no changes on the restricted side in deficit spending. Switching gears from budget to cash flow, very different looking, different statements being made about cash flow than have been made at this point in time in the prior number of years, because state deferrals are at this point expected to be very minimal compared to the past. And so the chart looks very different as well. The district has healthy cash flows at this point, given that the state is starting to pay their obligations on time each month. And we anticipate that we'll have inter-year deferrals in June of $2.3 million, which means basically the state will owe us about $2.3 million come the end of June. That number is down from the $80 million range during the fiscal crisis, where the state wasn't paying their bills, basically. Switching gears again, now looking at multi-year projections. So you see the 2014-15 column here, this is the data I just reviewed with you, about $33 million in deficit spending. We have $52 million on hand to handle that, and we have a requirement in our minimum fund balance of about $33.5 million. Deficit spending for 15-16, you can see, is at this point forecasted to be dramatically smaller, and again smaller in 16-17 as we move closer and closer to a fully balanced budget. You also see the fund balance adjusted accordingly, and the minimum fund balance also being adjusted accordingly. The standards, I'm going to skip economic outlook. You can certainly read that on your own, and there's no new information there that we haven't talked about in the past. An important component of the interim reports are the standards and criteria, some 26, 27 pages of questions that the state asks us, basically. And we answer those questions. They're both financial and non-financial data. And our answers, when they are outside of our historical range, then we find ourselves in a situation of not meeting the criteria. And so we have to provide an explanation for that. So let me give you an example. We have a historical average of ADA to enrollment of, I'm going to pick a number, 95 to 95.4%, low to high. And our current forecast is to be outside that range. In this particular case, it's very insignificant. It's like 95.5 in one year and 95.6 in another year. So our historical average is one thing, and in our current year and our forecast of the next 2 years, we're forecasting to be slightly outside that range. And so we don't meet that criteria because we don't fall within the high and low of our historical. That's an example of something under our control. There are also examples that are not under our control, such as additional one-time money from the state that throws off some percentage that we've had historically. And so I've itemized on this next couple slides those criteria that we don't meet. Criteria 3 is the example I just gave of ratio of ADA to enrollment. The variance is very insignificant, a 0.1, a 0.2 type of variance. Criteria number 4 is in our forecasted years and the out years. We don't meet the historical number, and that's because the percentage of gap funding coming to us from the local control funding formula is diminishing every year. The amount of money, actually, forget the percentage, the amount of money is diminishing every year. We got our first big payments from the state to implement LCFF in the first couple of years of the program. As we start to look out in the future years of the program, that amount starts to go down. That's outside of the historical number that was basically generated over just the last 2 years. And so that's not something that's in our control. However, we don't meet that criteria. Criteria 5 deals with unrestricted salaries and benefits. It is being greatly influenced by one-time expenditures for non-salary items in the current year and is a insignificant outside of the range variance in the out years. Criteria 6 deals with other revenue and expenses. Again, we have a significant variance, or not really significant, but a variance at second interim here, really driven by additional federal grants that I just talked about, Perkins and the California's Math and Science Project. Deficit spending, the variance is indicated, is really in part driven by large one-time expenditures from reserves in the current year. Overall, to summarize the whole report, the fiscal health indicators are all positive for the current year. The multi-year projection assumptions are optimistic, resulting in an increase in the district's estimated annual funding. I wouldn't describe them as unreasonable. They're just simply on the optimistic side of the scale of being reasonable. Assumptions related to increased staffing necessary to meet the K-3 grade span adjustments and targets, and the assumption of cost responsibility for ROP programs, regional occupational programs, are included in our multi-year projections. So what all this statement says is that 2 large impacts. One is continuing to lower class size in grades 1, 2, and 3, and assumption of the responsibility to pay for regional occupational programs are included in our forecast. Specifically, ROP used to be paid for by the County Office of Ed, and that responsibility is being transferred to local school districts. We are recommending to you positive certification tonight. That is the recommendation of staff and based on a summary that I just provided to you. And that would be our recommendation is for you to approve the second interim report with a positive certification.
Mrs. Lockbasson?
I'd move approval of a positive certification.
Thank you. Do I have Mr. Hunt?
I'll second it. I've said before, if I win the lottery, I'm going to do three things. I'm going to thank God, kiss my wife, and hire Mike Fine to manage my money. I want to commend him and his staff on behalf of our committee on what a good job his team did in pulling this together and the adjustments they made since then.
Exactly. It's wonderful to see this after years of qualified, right? Anybody else? Any comments? There's been a motion and a second. Please vote. That motion passes. We do accept that. Thank you so much. Now, Dr. Hansen, I think you're up for the consideration of 2015 California School Boards Association Delegate Assembly election.
Yes, item H8 this evening on the agenda. You have been provided with names of 6 candidates running for the California School Boards Association delegate. And the board can cast no more than 6 votes for the 6 vacancies in CSBA's subregion 18A. And I'll certainly defer to Mrs. Cloud or Mr. Hunt, who are involved with this, if they want to add any more information on this item.
Mrs. Cloud.
I would just recommend, in fact, I guess I would make a motion that we accept all 6 candidates for the 6 places we have. As you know, Mr. Hunt and I, are appointed because we have a large district, but most of these don't have as large a districts, and so then the delegates are voted on by the school boards in the region, and it's it's a 2-year cycle. So like Mr. Ben Johnson is from our board, we have other representation. And as you can see, several of these already are already delegates. So my recommendation again would be to accept the 6.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
I'll second.
Second?
I'll second that and say that I want to assure our colleagues up here that the ones with asterisks, Gail and I know, and they do attend the meetings. They're very active. And I'm glad to see, Mrs. Cloud, that Temecula is stepping forward. That's really been a district that hasn't been involved in our county and in CSBA. So I'm glad to see it happening. So I would second Mrs. Cloud's motion.
Okay. Any further comment? Please vote. All right. Thank you. That does pass. We are now come to the conclusion of our meeting. Before we take board members' comments, let me announce that we will be going back into closed session after this meeting is over. So board members, don't leave. Okay. And now board members' comments. Mr. Lee, would you like to start? Nothing? Thank you very much. Mr. Hunt?
Yes, I just wanted, I'm sure all of you read today at different schools. I read up at Lake Matthews and always impressed with what Pam Williams is doing up there. And in fact, and you may or may not know, but help me, Ms. Carmen Day, we're up for a blue ribbon for America Schools, National Blue Ribbon School, and a really nice PTA. And as tag on to that, then I read at Longfellow, is it Mrs. Cortez, right? Very nice lady, and she has, it's really wonderful what's happening at Longfellow. Their PTA has gone from her and 2 other parents to about 20 parents, and getting involved, and some of the things that she's doing over there are very impressive. As you know, Mrs. Pitchford set up the Read Across America Day, so I saw her on the playground, went over and gave her a hug, and we were chatting, and this little girl walked up, and she said, "Mrs. Pitchford, is that your dad?" And after Kathy finished with her hysterical laughing, she said no, it wasn't. But Jerry and I are looking forward to the special education prom. Hope that y'all are going to be there. And just back to Longfellow for a moment. I guess the food bank is now providing, is it every 3 weeks or so, fresh vegetables and that sort of thing. and the kids can go and pick these items out. It just shows you, we need to remember about some of our areas, there's about 100 homeless children that aren't able to take that food because they don't have access to cooking stoves and et cetera. I want to commend the staff this week, and Dr. Hansen, on their handling of the measles situation up at Earhart. And I would ask if the staff could provide to the board at every, again, even at Lake Matthews, which has a big parking lot. Dr. Lewis, informed me and helped me understand a few things about our traffic control. What we're not allowed to do as a school district. We're not allowed to ask parents to be traffic control people. We're not allowed to have that kind of person. We don't really have authority on that. I think it'd be just helpful for the board to have that in front of us. We know that some council members have been contacting us, and I think it'd be good just to have those facts. And lastly, Jesus Green, who's the president this year of CSBA, because I was on the airplane with him and couldn't get away, has asked me to join the ELA Adequacy Committee for CSBA, and we'll have our first meeting on March 18th in Sacramento. So I'll report back on that. Thank you.
Congratulations. Mrs. Lock-Dawson.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Alavi. Just a couple things. I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm the chair of the Student Activities Subcommittee, and I think I'm also Communications Subcommittee, unless Mrs. Cloud wants to do it. But I've worked with staff on both of those. I set a calendar for the Communications Subcommittee going forward for the rest of the year, and you should have gotten an email from Robin regarding those dates. So I encourage you to please submit items that you want discussed at those. And we're working on the calendar for the Student Activities Subcommittee as well. So just let me know, and I will have those out to you. I read at Emerson today, and Longfellow as well. Nobody thought I was Kathy Pitchford's mother, though, Mr. Hunt. So. And I did have green eggs and ham in her room, so that was fun. But at Emerson, every child at Emerson got a book, a free book that was courtesy of the Natalie Cole Regans Foundation. So they raised money last year for that, and I know I just want to put a plug in just so you know that that money goes for a good cause. There is a fundraiser coming up on April 18th for that foundation to continue Ms. Regan's love of reading. The reason, I just want to say, one of the reasons why I voted to table item G1 was because of I was a little bit different concern from Mr. Hunt, but I'm just putting this out there so I can ask staff to be prepared. I'm a little concerned about raising fees when we're talking about a GO bond, so I want to know how those two things link, if we're just how will we present that? Do we need it if we're doing a GO bond? Do we not need the GO bond if we're, just that was the concern I had with that. And I wanted to thank Mike Fine for your strategic recommendation regarding the funding of STEM and Ramona. That was excellent. Thank you. That's exactly the kind of solutions I think I love, the sort of creative approaches to these things and a little calculated risk-taking. So thanks for providing the board with something we can chew on that solves a problem for us. Okay, that's all I had. Ms.
Thank
Sauer.
you. Thank you very much. And just to shake things up a bit, I'm going to go ahead and give my comments next. I have two areas that I'd like to talk about. The first concerns a meeting that Dr. Hansen and I and various other people attended this last week at King, in which the King VAPA teachers all came together with a whole series of suggestions and ideas. One of the things they were talking about that's irritating them is something that reminded me, Mr. Hunt, of our complaints about City Hall, and that is paperwork permitting and how difficult it is to do all the permits, the paperwork part of getting things through the district. And I know that what happens though with a lot of big organizations like ours is sometimes the paperwork grows. So I would really like to toss it back to staff to look into ways to streamline that paperwork so there doesn't have to be 10 copies of everything. And I know that that's of interest to you guys as well, but it seems like we're duplicating things and making things particularly hard for teachers. So I'd really like to look into that. And my second comment is on the movie Race to Nowhere that was shown at Poly the other night. It was really a remarkable documentary, and if you get a chance to see it, you really should. Especially, Mr. Lee, you'd love it because it talks about what you're heading into. It talks about how kids have become so stressed and grade crazy that sometimes they work themselves into these anxiety balls of craziness. And one of the things that they brought out in that documentary, which was particularly interesting, was the efficacy of homework. And in that particular documentary, and I'd like staff to kind of take this and kind of see what they can come back with it, they suggested that there has been no studies done that show that homework in elementary grades was effective at raising academic performance. And that the efficacy actually is not quite so high as we thought in the higher grades as well. So I was thinking, and I was talking to Mrs. Carmen Day, and I was talking to Mr. Ayers at Poly as well, that we might want to look at homework policies, and we might want to actually consider in elementary school the concept of no homework weekends. Just because the documentary was so clear in describing what too much homework does to family life and what it does to the average child who has mounds and mounds of homework. Mr. Ayers was quick to point out that the quality of the homework is very essential, and that is true. But do we really want all of our elementary kids just mounds and mounds on the weekends? So it did occur to me that that is something I tossed back to staff to look into, because it might make us a friendlier, nicer district, I sure think. And now I would like to toss this over to Mrs. Cloud.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you noticed, but I usually don't wear red and white striped T-shirts. So this is my ode to Dr. Seuss Day. And I also wanted to remind us, because Mr. Hunt and I are RCSBA delegates, and there is a workforce development summit, which our district, I know Dr. Hansen sent out a lot of information about that. But Dr. Imran Farouk, and by the way, I see some of my leadership friends out there, so hi. This is going to take place this Saturday at La Sierra High School. And, you know, I just throw it out to you administrators and teachers who are still in the room. It might be a good opportunity to take, you know, some, especially like avid students to this event. So I just want to shout that out. And I also want to say something else. After spending much time in prayer and thought, I've decided not to run for re-election this year. And I wanted to let everybody know, heads up. This is not farewell, because I plan to be totally engaged as a board member through the end of my term. But I'm just letting you know so there is no more speculation. And I want to tell you, it's been such a pleasure to serve this district, but it's clear it's time to move on. We've seen the district through, and I use we because it has really been a joint effort, and I just am proud to have participated in it through very difficult financial times, and we've remained solvent. We've gone from a curriculum free-for-all when I was first elected to standards which include the foundation skills of a solid and necessary education, which particularly affect kids from poverty. We have offered choice to students and parents, especially with our core knowledge schools, or DLI schools, and our STEM school, which has gotten a lot of play tonight, along with many innovations and unique programs at each site. We have focused and are succeeding in preparing more students for college and careers. We've been on the forefront of integrating technology with sound curriculum practices. And here, let me get a little mother-like here, so no offense anybody, but I am a mother. We must always remember our goal of ensuring all students that they need to read, and our Pre-K Institute reminds us of that. We cannot forego math skills and seeking understanding. They go hand in hand. We need to remember our history and keep the best as we build on our future, but we can't forget what we've learned. Although we, to use the Ed vernacular, have promoted a guide on the side again, we need a sage on the stage all the time. Teachers are indispensable to student learning. There are always Harold Hills, forgive me, I just watched The Music Man this weekend, in education, but we need to ensure that they don't sell us what we don't need, and they're trying to sell us a lot right now. Most importantly, we can't excuse performance by poverty, which our history tells us we have done. We've done that in RUSD. Poverty limits experiences and opportunities, but it doesn't limit intelligence. And our schools are indispensable in nurturing that. RUSD has some of the best leaders, staff, and students anywhere, and it's been my great pleasure to rub elbows with them, to learn from you, to watch you, and to serve you. It's been a wonderful season, and I thank you all for making that possible. And now I'm going to pass the baton on to whoever runs and wins an election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Powell. We will enjoy all of the next 9, how many months? Pardon? How many months left? We'll enjoy them all. Thank you.
Almost 9.
Almost 9. Thank you so much. And now tonight we're going to adjourn in memory of Miss Artie Baylor, who passed away on February 24th. She served as a member of the RUSD Board of Education from 1976 to 1994 and cared deeply about our students and our families. Even after her retirement, she remained a longtime dedicated member of Riverside Educational Enrichment Foundation, the REEF Board. And in memory of Mrs. Grace Reed Fisher Athey, who served as a PTA president at Jackson Elementary School and Shamawa Middle School, who passed away on January 3rd. And Miss Susan Hirsch, Arlington High School English teacher, who passed away on March 1st. And Cushy Jones, the wife of longtime Poly teacher and coach Eddie Jones, who passed away suddenly 2 weeks ago. So I will be adjourning in their honor, and board members, please stay. Thank you.